Good afternoon, everyone. Just going to leave it a couple more seconds before we start, just to let more people join. Okay, perfect. Well, I'll start kicking us off. So, as you can see, firstly, welcome back to today's webinar. We're going to be focusing on a slightly new topic today, which is EPR. It's a new topic that we're going to be kind of focusing on here at SimplyVAT, and a new area where we're able to support our clients. I'm going to be joined by my colleague Jenny, who's coming from our content team. Jenny, I don't know if you just want to say a bit about yourself.
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Jenny Budd. I am the content exec at SimplyVAT. If you have interacted with our company very at all, you probably have seen or read something that I have designed or written, from emails to blogs and stuff. So you can find me and my work all over the place. And it's a pleasure to be here today to talk to you about my newest deep dive topic, EPR.
Perfect. Thank you, Jenny. And yeah, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Liam. I am the one who presents the majority of our webinars here at SimplyVAT. And also, I'm working on the sales and partnerships team. So I'll be having active discussions with yourself and your clients regarding kind of EPR moving forward. So before we kind of jump into the deep dive for the concepts, just a bit of housekeeping. We normally do a Q&A session. Today, we are not going to be doing one of those just because obviously it is quite a new topic and we'd love to have those conversations with you directly. So for any questions, please do just feel free to email us at hereToHelp@simplyvat.com. Myself and one of my colleagues will be monitoring that inbox and we'll be able to support you moving forward. Another thing is that this will be available to watch on demand. So once the webinar's finished, you'll be able to watch it here on our YouTube channel, and we'll also email you with a link to the video. And of course, just stay connected. Be sure to sign up for our newsletter through the link in the description, as we will be launching a few more exciting new things in the coming months. So stay tuned to keep an eye out for those. And looking at the agenda, the first thing that we're going to be focusing on is kind of what is EPR, what do you have to do with it, and what product categories are impacted. Focusing on a few more specifics such as PPWR, so packaging waste regulation, and Amazon Pay on Behalf, and then a few case studies. I will now leave Jenny to kind of go through the kind of what is EPR and the specifics around that, and I'll be back to discuss the case studies later.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to what is EPR. We're going to take a look, as Liam said, at what it is, how it works in practice, all of that good stuff, so that you know you have all of the information that you need to be able to make some decisions for your business going forward. We're going to start at the very beginning with the very basics, and I'm going to introduce you to the words that EPR stands for, is Extended Producer Responsibility. So, in 1990, Thomas Lindqvist and his colleague Carl Lidgren submitted reports to the Swedish Environment Ministry. And it's in this report that he coins the term Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR, for the first time. He goes on to work further with the Swedish Environment Ministry, and in a few other reports, we get this paper, which is published in 1992, called Towards an Extended Producer Responsibility, Analysis of Experiences and Proposals. This is where we get this quote, which I think sums up extended producer quite nicely. An environmental protection strategy to reach an environmental objective of decreased total environmental impact of a product by making the manufacturer of the product responsible for the entire life cycle of the product, and especially for the take-back, recycling, and final disposal. Okay, so that is actually quite wordy, but Lindqvist's point here is that collectively, we want to reduce the impact that the things that we sell and buy have on the environment. One of the ways that we can do that, he argues, is by making the product's producer an equal party in its disposal and recycling. So here in 2026, EPR is a sort of catch-all term used to describe legislation and rules and regulations built on Lindqvist's original policy suggestions and his sort of general concepts and ideas. So in this table, I have some examples. You can see, you might already be familiar with some of these, like for example, the really famous one, if you can say that waste management regulation is famous, is the Waste Electrical and Electronics Equipment Directive, or WEEE. We have kept that in the UK, a version of that in the UK post-Brexit. All of these laws are considered forms of EPR. So when we're talking about EPR, we're not necessarily referencing one particular piece of legislation, but rather groups or kinds of legislation and their implementation in various regions. I'll be talking about the requirements in individual countries like the UK, Germany, and France a little later, further into the webinar. So, as you're about to see, EPR adds some steps to the process of getting your product to market. For that reason, I think it's really helpful to understand why. The requirements make a lot more sense when you understand the problems that they're trying to address. In a 2024 webinar, History of Extended Producer Responsibility, Professor Lindqvist talked about the why of extended producer responsibility. In the last 70-ish years, the amount of waste that we have been creating collectively has drastically increased, particularly plastic waste. In turn, that has increased the stress on waste management systems. This graph, which I think is a really great, terrifying visual demonstration of the amount of plastic that we have produced globally over the last century, is from a company called Our World in Data. They're actually a non-profit. I will link them in the description of the webinar after it has become an on-demand video, because I think they're a really good place for you to get data analysis and visualization, and I think everybody should know about them. At the same time that we have increased the quantity of the waste that we're making, we've made it more complicated to manage. So in that webinar, Professor Lindqvist gave an example of cadmium being used in plastic production. Cadmium yellow has been a staple on artists' palettes since the early 1800s. Cadmium pigments are light fast and stable and vibrant. They are just perfect for packaging. However, cadmium, if you didn't know, is very poisonous. It's a toxic heavy metal. It's very dangerous to breathe it in, which you might be doing if, for example, you live near a waste disposal site where they regularly burn cadmium yellow packaging. So the question is, how do we dispose of cadmium yellow packaging? How do we tell which yellow packaging is coloured with cadmium versus the safe alternatives? Since the 90s, cadmium pigments have been very heavily regulated, and I'm talking about them here mostly as a good example of how we're finding ways to deal with these complex issues. You can see in this graph that the percentage of recycled plastic waste globally has increased over time. The amount for going to landfill has decreased, but the proportion of incinerated waste obviously has grown. There's an argument to be made that that's not the best route for us to be dealing with it globally. But when we're talking about very complex things like the materials inside particular kinds of waste and how we handle them and how we do that locally, globally, nationally, at all of these different scales, you can kind of see how the problem is both very global and very complicated. So we clearly have a waste management problem. The cost of collecting, separating, and recycling waste currently falls on governments, and then through them, us as taxpayers. EPR regulations seek to reduce the amount of waste we generate and make it easier and cheaper to dispose of by addressing the problem at one of its sources, product design. So that's the why, that's the big picture. We need to sort of tackle the amount of waste that we're producing. If you are familiar with reduce, reuse, recycle, we're sort of looking into reducing and reusing to make the recycling a lot easier. So let's take a look at how EPR actually works and how it's going to impact you. There are 3 steps at a very high level to this process. First, you're going to need to work out if you have any obligations, because you might not. You have to get the relevant registrations if you do, and then file and pay reports and contributions. EPR regulation centers around whether you are considered a producer, the producer and extended responsibility. If you are a producer, then you'll need to register, file, and pay a contribution towards the cost of recycling the products that you're putting to market. Producers are considered as introducing products to market. So that would be you if you manufacture and sell goods in a country where you're based, import goods into a country with EPR regulations, or even just sell a product in a country with EPR regulations. It's really about putting the product to market. If you're not based in the EU, you're going to need an authorised representative to register for EPR. The authorised representative is the go-between for you and the Producer Responsibility Organisation, or PRO. They're jointly liable for your compliance, so if you don't pay the fee, for example, the PRO can request it from them instead. At the moment, the requirement for an authorised representative is dependent on the country that you're registering in, but from the 12th of August, PPWR changes that. I will go over PPWR later. It's just a very broad topic, so it needs its whole slide, basically. But right now, you just need to know that after the 12th, appointing an authorised representative will be mandatory for all non-EU businesses, no matter which country you're selling to. You need to appoint one in every country. So, for example, you can't have an authorised representative for all of the EU. If you sell in France and Belgium and the Netherlands, you'll need an AR in every single country. If you decide to register for EPR through us, we would be your authorised representative in the 10 countries that we can help you in. So, PRO, I mentioned them earlier, the Producer Responsibility Organisations. They're at the core of how EPR works every day. They're the government-approved bodies that manage the systems. They're usually non-profits, and essentially they act as the link between producers, governments, and waste management systems. Like, they handle all of the admin and record keeping, for example, and just link those 3 pieces together to make everything move smoothly. When you're registering for EPR, what you're actually doing is joining a PRO as a member. Some countries, like Germany, run a dual system. You might have heard of Lucid, which is LUCID. It's the German packaging register. If you want to register for EPR in Germany, what you'll have to do is register with Lucid and then join the relevant PRO. Not every country works like that, and some of them, it's just a single registration. So in Spain, for example, you would probably just register with ProCircular. EPR typically runs on an annual basis. So that means that if you should be prepared to report on the relevant activity from the start of the calendar year that you're in. So for example, if you register in July, you'll likely have to submit reports of, say, your packaging data, for example, all the way back to January, and then be ready to go forward from there with reports every month. In most countries, PROs have a registration fee, which you would pay annually to be listed as a member. And like VAT, EPR is something that you need to sort out before you get started in a new market. If you're selling on Amazon, you should know that Amazon is really hot on this because they are more involved in the responsibility of ensuring that you are compliant. So if you are asked to provide EPR registrations by Amazon and you can't because you haven't registered, then you are rapidly approaching getting your account suspended. Once you're registered, you'll need to submit your first lot of data. This is what in the UK we would call the nitty-gritty. It's like the fine details. The specific details you need to provide will depend on the category that you're applying for, but usually what you're being asked for is the material composition of your product or its packaging, the weight by material type, and the amount, the quantity that you're putting to market. You might need to include things like the percentage of recycled content or the recyclability classification. The first report will be an estimate of the amount that you expect to put to market, and then the PRO will use that data to calculate your fee for the year. This is separate to the registration fee. It's the contribution that I have talked about. You might see these called eco fees, and they're usually invoiced annually, but it's not uncommon to see monthly, quarterly, or biannual frequencies. It all depends on what you're registering for and where. As you'll see, EPR, as we talked about, is not a singular thing. It's a catch-all term. So the country that you're registering in and the category that you're registering for will change a lot of the fine details, like when you have to pay, the frequency, and what data that you're being asked for. So we mentioned Amazon earlier. If you're selling on Amazon, you can actually take advantage of a scheme that they run called Pay on Behalf. In Belgium, France, Italy, Spain, and in the UK, they will automatically enroll you in this and then bill you for your EPR fees. So basically what they're doing is taking your product and sales data and calculating, estimating basically, as the PRO would do, the amount that you would be charged, and then charging you that so that then they can pass it to the PRO. If you register for EPR in any of these countries as an Amazon seller, you'll need to put your EPR number into Amazon. Otherwise, as we have discussed earlier, they will probably suspend you. Once you do that, they'll stop charging you. And basically what you've done there is you've told Amazon that you're electing to handle the reporting and the payments going forward yourself. TikTok Shop also has a version of this, and it works in basically the same way. All of this information is really easy to get from TikTok and Amazon. They are very keen, obviously, that you comply with these rules because they also get in trouble if you don't, hence why they're so hot about suspensions. So that's a brief look at how EPR works in practice. Let's look at the categories. I've included some examples of the kinds of products covered by these categories, but these aren't exhaustive lists. So if your product isn't here, that doesn't necessarily mean it's not covered by EPR somewhere. Best practice would be to look up the PRO and contact them, see if they have any, if they have a list. A lot of them, say for example, the PROs in France are very good about publishing the lists of what is and what isn't required. Or you can also get in touch with us and we can do all of that stuff for you. So I thought I would start with the famous one, the one I think most people have heard of, which is the Waste Electrical and Electronic Equipment, or WEEE. It was introduced in the EU in 2003, which makes it one of the oldest pieces of EPR legislation, and it has remained active in the UK after Brexit. Essentially, it covers everything that has uses electricity, batteries, or has electronic components. So as you can see here, monitors, equipment with screens, light bulbs. This is the one that's the most specific, I think, in terms of here is 5 broad categories. If he falls into here, this is it. In addition to registering and reporting for WE, you also need to include this symbol, the wheelie bin with the crossed out wheelie bin with the black bar on there, to make it clear that your products can't be disposed of in general waste. In the UK, we call this symbol a wheelie bin. I don't think that that's a universal, but it is a street, a municipal bin, essentially. It cannot go in general waste. This one trips people up a bit. It's batteries. Batteries are actually separate to WE, so depending on what you're selling, you might not be covered just by WE. Batteries are incredibly dangerous when they're mixed in with household waste. When they're damaged, like by a garbage truck compressing them, they're prone to explode or catch on fire. In May this year, The Guardian reported that battery fires in UK bin lorries and in recycling centres are now estimated to cost about £1 billion a year, which makes this a very important piece of regulation. So batteries is whether you're selling products that contain batteries, say as a laptop or a pair of headphones. If you're selling them on their own, like if you just sell a pack of AAAs, for example, or, and this is the thing I think trips people up the most, if you're selling a product that you're also including batteries in. So the example I've given here is you sell a remote control car and you've included the batteries in the package so that, kid at Christmas can just open the packet and play with them straight away. Single-use plastics. They're covered in the EU under a piece of legislation called the Single-Use Plastics Directive, which bans certain products like plastic cutlery and polystyrene containers. I've outlined Austria, Germany, and Ireland on this slide because they have implemented the directive at a national level in different ways. So, for example, Germany introduced the Single-Use Plastics Fund, which requires you to sign up for the Environment Agency's DIVID platform, DIVID. Single-use plastics covers, mostly this is about food containers, to be honest. That's the prevailing example. Anything that's like a takeaway food container, beverage containers and cups, packets and wrappers, and then lightweight carrier bags. Those are all of the sort of the most common examples of the single-use plastics that aren't already banned by the Single-Use Plastics Directive. As you can see here, France is a bit of a special case. They've really taken to EPR, so much so that I have had to break out all of France's stuff into one slide on its own. Printed paper, textiles, toys, sporting and leisure, tyres, chemical articles, DIY and gardening, furniture, food service packaging, and medical equipment, plus WE, plus batteries, plus packaging. So France really has gone to town on this. They have covered an extraordinary amount of things. And as I said, these aren't exhaustive lists because I could probably have 6 slides for almost all of these categories. Printed paper, I think, is an interesting one because it is separate to packaging, but includes things that you might traditionally consider to be packaging. Say, for example, if you, as part of your process for sending out orders, if you include printed paper inside your orders, like thank you notes or brochures or like anything that is a thing that you've had printed, leaflets, catalogues, those kinds of things, those all count as printed paper and they will count towards EPR, and they're a registration that is separate to the rest of your packaging. DIY and gardening and chemical articles can cross over in some places. So, for example, paint. If you're selling paint, you will need to be careful about which registration that you're getting. And then finally, medical equipment, which I think is quite a slim group of products, but basically it covers piercing equipment like needles and syringes. Now, this is the big one. I think it's fair to say that for e-commerce, packaging is the most impactful EPR category. It pretty much guarantees that you have some sort of compliance obligation in Europe. It covers all kinds of packaging, sales, grouped, transport, service, and composite, all over Europe. Some of these are quite self-explanatory, like sales packaging is the jar that your cosmetic comes in, for example. Grouped packaging is the multi-pack wrap or POS boxes, anything that any packaging that holds individual packages, essentially. Transport packages is your pallets and your plastic strapping. Service packaging is where we start to blend into the single-use plastics thing. It's bags, trays, takeaway containers. And composite packaging is anything that can't be separated by hand. So, for example, if you're selling lotion with a plastic pump on as the dispensing mechanism, if your plastic pump has a metal spring in it, then that is a composite. Blister packs for medicine, those kinds of things, where you have the foil and the plastic, those are composite. And toothpaste tubes are another really great example. So packaging is obviously a really big deal, and it affects a lot of people who are here watching this. And if that wasn't enough, we are talking now about PPR, PPWR, packaging and packaging waste regulation. I am actually just going to touch on this because we could do a whole other webinar just on this. I wrote a more in-depth piece about this for our website, which we'll be sending to you with the on-demand link after the webinar. I'll also make sure that it's linked in the description of the video, just so that you have access to it. PPR, as I said, is the packaging and packaging waste regulation. It's EU legislation that begins to apply from the 12th of August, even though it has actually been in effect longer than that. PPR has three main goals: to make all packaging in the EU market recyclable in an economically viable way by 2030, safely increase the percentage of recycled plastics being used in packaging, and the safely here I think mostly refers to some recycled packaging in things like food containers, like milk bottles, for example. And the final goal is to reduce the quantity of virgin materials used in packaging. And by that, obviously, we mean raw, like virgin plastic that's not been recycled. To achieve this, PPR adds some new rules for packaging, like the requirement for an authorized representative that I mentioned earlier. The main thing that you need to do is assess the design of your packaging. You need to see if you can increase the percentage of recycled plastic and opt for packaging that can be reused more than once by design. At the same time, you need to minimize the amount of packaging that you're using. I think this is a really big one. Like, this is the thing that when I was researching this kind of struck me, because it has some very specific rules. So, for example, unless they are functional, things like double walls and false floors in containers are going to be straight up banned. So if the best example of this I can think of is cosmetics and skincare, like lotion jars, for example, where the amount of product in the jar is disproportionate to the size of the jar. You're not going to be able to do that anymore in the EU. Right sizing your packaging is becoming more important than ever. You're going to have to talk to your logistics partners and together make an effort to reduce the amount of empty space in your packaging. The example that I put in this blog when I was writing it was I once ordered a pack of fountain pen cartridges online, and they came alone in a box big enough for our very fat cat to sit in it very comfortably. Stuff like packaging peanuts and airbags, which, you used to be able to just sling in there to fill out the empty space, those aren't going to count anymore. The EU will consider that to be empty space. So you need to make sure as best as you can that your packaging fits its contents. So that was a lot of information to try and make it a little bit easier to understand. Liam is going to talk you through a couple of case studies.
Perfect. Thank you, Jenny. So yeah, thank you so much for all that information. I feel like it was quite a lot. And hopefully now it can be put into a bit of practice. So yeah, if we look at the first case study, I think with this one, we've got a US-based electronics seller who is looking to enter the German market through Amazon FBA. Their products, due to the fact that they're obviously electronics, do trigger some multiple categories within the EPR. So you're looking at packaging, WEEE regulations, as well as batteries. So in order for this client to be compliant, they would need to appoint an authorized representative and register in the Lucid and with a PRO, register for WEEE, and once registered, they would need to submit their EPR numbers through to Amazon, file the ongoing reports, and also pay any fees that are due. With this one, it's quite important to highlight that obviously in Germany, there is no pay on behalf scheme, as Jenny highlighted. So it is one of the key markets where a lot of people will need that before they begin scaling into Germany.
Yeah, I would also add that if you're already selling in Germany, or you have done a little bit of research with the intent to start there, then you probably have already noticed. But Germany as a nation is a stickler, essentially. Like, they're very strict on these things. Like, this is the one. I mean, you should be getting it right everywhere. But if you're gonna put all your energy into making sure it's 100% perfect anywhere, then I would recommend that place is Germany.
And I would say that that stems true for the VAT side of things as well,
Yes.
for the market. So just making sure everything is kind of on time, especially for Germany. So looking at the next one, we've got a EU business now. So they're a French cosmetics brand expanding into Germany and also through Spain through their own website. Their EPR obligations are product and shipping packaging, so bottles and mailers, and they're already compliant, obviously, within France. So to get compliant in the other member states, they need to register for Lucid within Germany and also with a PRO in Spain. And once registered, they would need to file the reports and pay the fees in each country. So I think the key message here as well is not just looking at the markets where you're going to be holding stock, look at where you're going to be selling stock through to. So even if you're planning on just selling in Netherlands, obviously that triggers the need for a Netherlands VAT obligation, but also you'd need to look at the EPR as well as looking elsewhere. So if you're selling into Germany, you wouldn't need a German VAT registration, for example, if you're doing sales from Netherlands into Germany, but you would need the EPR registration. So you need to think about EPR and VAT kind of side by side, but also slightly separately in the flow of goods.
Yeah. I also thought that this would be a really good one to talk about that I've seen online a lot, a common misconception, both for people who are in the EU and people who aren't. And I think this is totally reasonable because of how many layers there are. But there is no like EU-wide EPR registration. So if you're, for example, based in France and you have your EPR stuff sorted in France, you're still going to have to do it in Germany and in Spain. And that is true for everybody, regardless of where you're based.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to highlight as well. So I think just really when you're looking at expansion, always think about where your products are going, what's in your products, and how you can get compliant in those countries. With that, we have now come to the end of today's webinar. So I want to thank Jenny again for all of the content. That was really good and really interesting. We do have some additional resources for everyone. So we are going to be launching an EPR quiz. So that will be on our website. You can kind of look and see what your obligations are. And then a member of our team can also support you if any support is required. As Jenny mentioned, we're also going to be launching a PPWR blog, if not already published. And that will be sent out after today's kind of webinar as well. And follow us on LinkedIn because we're constantly posting updates when it comes to things. So LinkedIn, other socials, always keep an eye out because, as I mentioned at the start of today's session, we are going to be launching even more exciting things in the coming months. So keep an eye out because it's going to be really interesting over the next 6 months here at SimplyVAT.
Yeah. And that's it.
Perfect.
I hope that wasn't too confusing, but as we said, if you have any questions, please email us at heretohelp@simplyvat.com, and we'll do our best to answer you within, I think, 24 hours, which is pretty cool.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you all in the next one.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.